most new chief risk officers feel pressure to act quickly. Assess the risks, fix the gaps, strengthen the risk framework. That instinct is understandable, but that bias toward action is often the quickest way to lose a room. The real priority is much less obvious. Welcome back. You're listening to Julien A. on Risk Masters The Download, where I share bite-sized insights from our latest interview. This highlight comes from our conversation with Jennifer Gary, where we explore what a chief risk officer should prioritize in their first 90 days.
So now I'd like to drive us somewhere. Actually, for the first time on this show, we're going to do. So I would like to do a little bit of role play, if that's okay with you. And the scenario will be: let's say someone just stepped into a chief risk officer role at a high growth fintech, which I think you've done, right? So governance is loose, compliance is getting more complex by the day, and the business is pushing fast to go ahead. And they've got 90 days to land well. So let's play with that a little bit. Where should they begin?
Well, I think actually they need to begin before they took on the role. And what I mean by that is, it's fine to have a fast-moving, high-growth, ambitious organization, but I would want to satisfy myself before I went in there that they were going to balance that with an appropriate approach to risk. So I would actually be setting up my stall, and also hearing from them in terms of how far they're willing to push things, whether they will listen to me. If I say, look, guys, we're pushing up against something here. This isn't feeling great. I'm hearing from people. This isn't good. One of my favorite questions when I'm talking to the person who will say ultimately be my boss in that scenario will be, what happens the first time we disagree, right? This is all feeling lovely, we're having a great interview and so on, but what happens what happens if we disagree? How does that resolve itself? And I need to know, like, for example, if it's going to be the chief executive who will be my boss, that they're going to respect the risk agenda. They're not going to do I used to call it, if mum says no, ask dad, as a pair, as a pair, or if dad says no, ask dad. But the idea that if you go to one person and you get one answer, you go to the other person and you get a different answer. You've got to feel, I believe anyway, as a chief risk officer, that the chief executive, the executive team has your back, and it's fine for there to be give and take. It's fine for there to be push and pull. That's healthy, and that's why you have that sort of balanced risk, balanced executive team. But I think you want to say, if I'm going to come in here and if I'm going to help you be that success that you want to be, we're only going to do that if we know how far to go on things. We know the risks that we consciously want to take. And risk management isn't about taking zero risk, right? There's commercial risks you can take, there's pricing, there's going into new markets, right? There's all sorts of risks that organizations take every day. But there's going to be some risks that we don't want to take, and there's going to be some places where we set appetite and we don't want to go beyond there. So I know I've slightly maybe, given you a trick answer to a question, which is I would establish a lot beforehand. Obviously, if you're satisfied with those answers and you come in and you join the organization, then it's about really understanding and investing in the strategy and what's going to make the organization successful, and showing your stakeholders that you care about the success of the organization just as much as they do. And so that if you say, guys, this isn't okay, we can't do this, we've got a problem, I'm going to slow you down, we can't launch tomorrow, we can't do whatever it is, that it's coming from a place of wanting the organization to succeed. I did have a situation in an organization I worked in where I was the sole dissenting voice, and it hasn't happened often, and it really shouldn't happen very often because you've set expectations in advance. But there was a moment and there was a judgment call, and I said, guys, I'm sorry, we're not ready, this isn't okay. However, this is what it's going to take to get it sorted, and I think we can have it all done within 24 hours. And because I had built those relationships with people, they knew I cared, they knew I wasn't being a blocker just for the sake of it, and we got it done in 24 hours and we got it out safely.
So effectively, and just to put that into context, preparing in advance of starting the role for me will also be asking the right question during the interview process, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I'm saying. This is obviously you get past a point where hopefully you've convinced them that you're the right person for the job. But you say, look, if I come in, if we come in to do this, and I really want to do this, and I want this to be a success, but that's going to mean that we make the right judgment calls along the way. And the path, is littered with organisations that got that risk reward, risk judgment, risk strategy equation wrong, and we don't want to do that. So asking those questions, sounding people out, figuring out how you're going to, I'll quote from another podcast, disagree agreeably, right? Figuring out and how you're going to work a problem and come up with a solution.
The first 90 days as a Chief Risk Officer are not about immediate impact. They're about building the conditions for impact, understanding how decisions are made, clarifying expectations across the executive team, and establishing the relationship that will determine whether risk insights are acted on. Because acting too early creates activity, acting at the right time creates influence. You can listen to the full Risk Masters conversation with Jenny on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or at evitium.com.
Yeah, everyone's been violently in agreement and it's been super exciting all the way, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, and we haven't prepared for this, and we don't know how to work that problem. So I would establish some of that up front.